Dr. Gupta, to you, the upcoming India-Brazil-South Africa summit, it's obviously of keen interest to South Africa as well. And I was wondering if you could tell us what you think will be the key issues that will be discussed at this year's summit.
The summit is going to give an opportunity to the three countries to look into the future of IBSA. And it's good that they do so now, because IBSA over the last 10 years or so has done quite a lot. It has, for instance, a mechanism of working groups that it has set up. There is also an IBSA trust fund. They've also looked at IBSA-MAR exercises. But all this needs to be consolidated further. IBSA needs to define its identity and try to distinguish itself from some other organizations like BRICS, for instance. So I think this will be a good opportunity for them to consolidate what they have done already, which is really strengthening South-South cooperation, and also look at how they can implement some of the projects and also strengthen the mechanisms that they have set up, particularly the working groups, because this needs to be strengthened quickly and fast so that IBSA outcomes, IBSA results are felt by others, and IBSA is seen as a useful forum by not only the three countries but also countries outside.
Ms. Berry, the same question to you. What do you think will be the key issues to be discussed this year?
It's very important to note that IBSA is completing 10 years of its existence. So I think this is the time when IBSA countries need to sit together and discuss as to how relevant IBSA is and take a stock of whatever they have, achieved in the last 10 years, and then work towards improving whatever they had planned, whether that's really succeeded, and if not, then what can they do in terms of improving their delivery.
Dr. Gupta, now we know that India has been very involved. It's a founding member of the United Nations, and it's been very involved in international security for quite a long time. Where do you see India's role going, and what do you think its strengths are?
The first objective India has is to see that UN is democratized. The United Nations and the entire system was set up way back in 1945 when the world was different. The world has now changed. I think there's a need to democratize it, make its organs more representative, particularly the UN Security Council. Having said that, India has been deeply involved with almost all organs of the United Nations. And to just give you one example, India's contribution to the UN peacekeeping is perhaps amongst the top 2 or so. Even today we are contributing something like 8,000 or 9,000 troops at any given point of time. We have had our troops present in almost every single mission that the United Nations has taken. So peacekeeping and peace building now is a very important part of the United Nations Charter, United Nations work, and India is contributing to that. The other issue that is important and which was flagged about 10 years ago in the UN Secretary General's high-level panel, which was to prepare the UN for new security issues that are emerging. And in this, a large number of 6 clusters of security issues were involved, and they included mostly now what we call the non-traditional security issues. And I think some work has been done in order to strengthen the UN delivery system, but far more needs to be done, and India would be involved in almost all of the UN endeavors.
Now, Ms. Berry, we know you to be an expert in India-Africa relations. Could you perhaps give us some overviews on what India's role has been on the continent, and what its strengths has been, and where you see India going forward in terms of its relations with Africa?
Here I would like to mention that you need to look at the India-Africa Forum Summit, the last India-Africa Forum Summit, and that made it very clear as to what is the buzzword of India-Africa relations and what is the message that India is giving to Africa, and that is capacity building and human resource development. That is the main message. India is there for partnership with the African countries. They are not there to impose their will on the African countries. They're basically looking at partnership, and partnership is need-based. It's the African countries which come forward and request that, this is what we need from India. and that's the way the partnership goes forward. So it's a need-based partnership, and India has devoted a lot of effort in terms of building the resources in Africa, because India realizes that its own development, the splendid economic growth that India has achieved is basically tied to the human resources. It's the services sector in which India has excelled. So India is ready to offer its model of development to the African countries.
We've already alluded a bit to the BRICS and as well at the beginning of the interview. Could you perhaps, we've all heard it before, we know the talks about IBSA being obsolete and whether the dual membership in both of these organizations is of any use. Could you perhaps elaborate on what you think would be what the benefit is of IBSA and whether the membership to these two bodies can actually be mutually beneficial?
There is a lot of talk about how relevant is IBSA now, because BRICS is there. There are people who are talking a brick has fallen on top of IBSA. I don't believe that this is true. I think IBSA and BRICS are two separate entities, and you must remember that I think this is something which I really believe in, that IBSA is the foremost organization in terms of South-South cooperation which came forward. It was the first organization of its own kind, where three countries are looking themselves as the voice of the South, and it's only later on that the other informal organizations came up. BRICS is basically something which was formulated by Goldman Sachs, and it's basically now that we are breathing life into BRICS, in terms of cooperation. So I'm not really sure whether BRICS is really an organization which is talking in terms of political cooperation. So there might be some differences in BRICS, but in case of IBSA, I think it's a total voice of the South.
Now over to you, Dr. Gupta. What do you think? Is there any dichotomy between IBSA and BRICS?
IBSA should be seen really, it should try and distinguish itself as a South-South cooperation forum. And the three countries, IBSA, India, Brazil and South Africa, are democracies. Now that is a very strong point that IBSA has. BRICS deals with a probably different set of issues. Yes, there's some sort of an overlap, but that is why I think it's very important for IBSA to distinguish itself on South-South cooperation issues. So I don't see any competition, but it is really upon IBSA leadership to make sure that whatever has been achieved is consolidated and the delivery mechanisms, they are strengthened.
Thank you both.